Hi, I'm Abby from Ratings.com. Today, we're reviewing our first TV of the 2024 season, the Samsung DU8000, and there's a lot more to come. New in 2024 is our review tracker. You can follow our process for each of our upcoming reviews as they happen. That way, you always know where we're at. The Samsung DU8000 is obviously at the end of the pipeline now, so we can deliver the full review. Is it worth your time and money? Well, we bought and tested the 65-inch model, but our results are valid for all other models, except for the big 85-inch screen. That one has a 120Hz panel with VRR support, and it's sold for a much higher price than the smaller model sizes. Well, without further ado, let's jump into it. The Samsung DU8000 looks good for an entry-level model. We'd even say it looks premium. From the front, you'll notice the usual thin bezels on three sides, with a slightly thicker one on the bottom. From the back, the TV is entirely made of plastic with etched horizontal lines. There are two ports facing towards the back, while the rest of the ports are on a cutout on the left side of the TV. All these ports are hard to reach when the TV is wall-mounted, so make sure your mounting setup lets you pull the TV away from the wall. The TV does have channels on the back through which you can route cables, and it comes with a clip that you can attach to either foot for further cable management. On the topic of feet, the TV has a set of height-adjustable plastic feet. The lowest position of the TV is only about 2 inches from the table, so if you want to place a soundbar directly in front, opt instead for the higher position, which lifts the TV about 3 inches. While the Samsung looks good, its build quality is mediocre at best. There's a noticeable wobble front to back, although it does settle quickly. There's also some flex on the back of the TV, and it's worse near the VESA mounting points, although this is typical and won't cause any issues. What is less typical is the large gap between the screen and the bezel. We're not sure if this misalignment is a common issue or limited to just our product, so let us know if you found any quirks with your 2024 Samsung models in the comments below. The TV has 3 HDMI ports, one of which points directly towards the wall. The second HDMI port also doubles as an eARC port, which is capable of passing through many advanced audio formats from Dolby, such as Dolby Digital Plus 7.1 and Dolby True HD 7.1. But it can't pass through any DTS audio format, so you won't get the best sound while playing content from Blu-rays or even old-school DVDs, as they all tend to use DTS for their audio. Otherwise, the TV also has 2 USB ports, 1 LAN port, and a digital optical audio out port, which faces the back alongside the third HDMI port. Like other Samsung models released this year, the TV comes with the 2024 version of Samsung's proprietary Tizen OS. Because of the entry-level nature of this TV, it has a reduced feature set compared to the more expensive models. It's missing features such as TV to mobile or ambient mode plus. At least it's still fast and easy to use, and it has some of Samsung's nifty perks, like their multi-view feature. Another great feature of this TV? A bunch of ads! And you can't even disable them. Sure, you can turn off targeted ads, so instead of seeing ads for things related to your interests, you get a bunch of ads for things you know or don't care about, which seems like a great learning opportunity if you ask me. The DU8000 comes with the same excellent remote as other Samsung models. It's small and minimalistic, but super functional. There's no numpad, but there are buttons for the most popular streaming services. The remote also has an integrated mic that works with the Bixby and Alexa voice assistants, so you can bark orders at your TV.
And it must respond.
Like with other Samsung TVs, you can charge the controller through the USB-C or through solar power, thanks to the solar panel on its back. This is a very cool, environmentally friendly feature, and we wish other manufacturers had that. Time to talk about image quality. Sadly, this TV is functional, but unremarkable when it comes to contrast. Its native contrast is good, but it doesn't have local dimming to truly push its contrast to the next level. So, while blacks are deep and very dark scenes, the moment a bright highlight is present, the blacks become raised and look washed out. Of course, no local dimming means no blooming around bright highlights or subtitles in dark scenes, and no unsightly lighting zone transitions. But they're poor trade-off for the raised blacks. Plus, the TV can't emphasize bright highlights in HDR scenes without local dimming. Take, for example, a scene that takes place in a dark cave. A TV with local dimming can emphasize the very bright fire of a torch versus the dark tones of the surrounding rocky caverns, so that the torch, like in real life, can look so much brighter than everything else. Without local dimming, the TV can't do that, and instead, the entire scene is bright and the torch doesn't look any brighter than what's around it. On top of that, this TV just doesn't get very bright, so the entire scene looks dim to begin with. At least, its reflection handling is decent, especially when dealing with any ambient lighting in the room, but it just can't compensate for the TV's low HDR brightness. So when watching high dynamic range content on this TV, turn off a few lights because it's just not bright enough for well-lit rooms. The TV does better when watching SDR content, but it's still subpar. Again, just turn down the lights when watching anything on this TV. It's not the dimmest TV we've ever seen, but it's not worth writing home about. Let's continue with more bad news. This TV has a narrow viewing angle. This isn't anything new for an LED TV, and it certainly isn't surprising for an entry-level model like this one. If you want an LED TV with a wider viewing angle, you'll need to invest in more expensive models from Sony, Samsung, and LG. Otherwise, only OLEDs have truly exceptional viewing angles. As it stands, sit right in front of this TV unless you're a fan of color shifting and brightness loss. We sure aren't. On a slightly more positive note, the TV's calibration accuracy is satisfactory out of the box. Still, all colors are underrepresented in all shades of white, the TV's color temperature leans too cold, and gamma is much darker than the 2.2 target, but its color accuracy is decent. There are noticeable inaccuracies with magentas, reds, and blues, but overall, unless you're a color purist, you're not likely to be bothered by any of this. You can improve it a bit through calibration, although there's a software bug at the time of this review that makes it harder to calibrate this TV effectively. Anyway, you won't really have to calibrate this TV since it's decently accurate out of the box, which is nice, since a professional calibration might cost as much as the TV itself, which kind of defeats the purpose of buying a budget model. Now we finally have some real positives. This TV's PQ EOTF tracking is great. That means that when watching HDR content, the brightness of the shadows, midtones, and highlights are mostly just as the content creator intended. Like all LED TVs, blacks are raised a bit, and the TV does lean a bit on the darker side of things, but for the most part, it follows the PQ EOTF curve quite closely. The TV even preserves some bright highlights when content gets close to the peak brightness. If you'd prefer a brighter but less accurate image, you can switch the TV's HDR tone mapping to active. It changes how the TV tone maps content, but overall, it's a personal preference. Accuracy versus a bit more pop. It wouldn't be a Samsung TV if it didn't have a wide color gamut, which the DU8000 does have. Sure, it's not as wide as more expensive offerings, but it's good and will satisfy anyone shopping for entry-level models. Still, in the DCI-P3 color space, most of the TV's colors lean towards undersaturation, and less saturated reds and blues aren't displayed correctly. When watching content in the wider Rec 2020 color space, most colors are slightly off the mark, meaning they're not displayed exactly as they should be, but it's okay. Now, this isn't a TV for streaming fans, or at least not the TV for those of you who watch low-quality streams, such as when you have a slower internet connection or when you're subscribed to one of Netflix's lower-quality plans. That's because the TV doesn't seem to be doing any actual smoothing. Low-quality content shows noticeable compression artifacts in the form of macro blocking, although the upside to the TV doing nothing is that details are preserved well. Or it might be more accurate to say that it doesn't lose any detail due to it doing nothing. But hey, a win's a win. Nevertheless, this might be a bug, as last year's Samsung CU8000 did a much better job of smoothing out low-quality content. Thankfully, the TV does a better job when upscaling lower resolution content. Hard-coded text is a bit hard to make out, but overall details are preserved well. We did notice something peculiar though. The sharpness setting doesn't seem to impact the image much, if at all. Looks like another bug. This TV uses pulse width modulation to dim its backlight, which introduces flicker that can bother people who are sensitive to it. The TV's flicker frequency varies depending on the picture setting, but in movie mode, which is the mode we found to be the most accurate overall after calibration, the TV flickers at 480 Hz at all brightness levels, which is pretty good. In game mode, it's even better. It's flicker-free at all brightness levels. We love it! In some of the picture modes, the TV does flicker at 240 Hz, which is low enough to give you a headache if you're sensitive to flicker. So we'd suggest sticking to movie mode for the most part, or game mode when gaming. The TV removes Judder from native 24p signals, like when watching DVDs or Blu-rays, or when watching movies from native apps. But, as we often see on TVs, it doesn't remove Judder from any 60 Hz sources, so movies played from satellite or cable boxes aren't Judder-free. Game time. Is this the entry-level gaming TV of your dreams? No, not really. Although it's a decent choice. Its response time is good overall, which we love, but the TV's transitions and dark scenes are extremely slow. This is very noticeable in the form of dark smearing. It's not a good TV to use with dark content such as horror games and movies, or even when using your operating system in dark mode. You'll be fine if you play brighter titles and stick to lighter colors on your OS. Thankfully, the TV has incredibly low input lag in game mode, and it can transmit a Chroma 444 signal in game mode as long as you set the input to PC. However, the TV has a strange intermittent issue when displaying Chroma 444, as you can see here. It kind of looks like dithering. Perhaps yet another software bug? Sadly, 1440p doesn't work in game mode, as it displays that resolution in a cropped window. That's not optimal for 1440p gamers, as you'll be saddled with high input lag when playing at that resolution. Outside of that, the TV supports all other common resolutions at 60 Hz. Of course, as we've previously said, the 85-inch model supports up to 120 Hz at all common resolutions, so that's a nice perk. However, we don't know how 1440p is on that model since we haven't tested it. The TV works well with consoles, but obviously it's a bit thin on features as it doesn't support 120 Hz on any model size below 85 inches. And it doesn't work well in 1440p, and it doesn't have any VRR support. But hey, at least it has auto low latency mode, so it automatically switches to game mode when it recognizes a console. You've heard this before. The speakers on this TV will do their job just fine if all you want is clear dialogue when watching movies and shows. They're well balanced at moderate listening levels, but their frequency response worsens as the volume increases and more distortion is introduced. The TV also doesn't get very loud, so you'll likely raise its volume. Ultimately, you just won't get good sound. The typical recommendation remains: just get a soundbar. So, this brings us to our main question. Should you buy this TV? No, you shouldn't. As with many low and even mid-tier TVs from the three popular brands, LG, Samsung, and Sony, it's hard to recommend this model due to its poor price-to-performance ratio. The Samsung DU8000 doesn't have the brightness or local dimming needed for great picture quality. Its narrow viewing angle and lack of modern gaming features make it a hard sell even for an entry-level gaming unit. It's also rather buggy in its current state. At the DU8000's price point, there are much better TVs, like the Hisense U7K. It has tons of modern gaming features like VRR and HDMI 2.1 bandwidth support, so you can game up to 144 Hz with 4K on PC or console. Plus, its picture quality isn't just brighter, it's better. Alternatively, if those features aren't too important, you can always check out the Hisense U6K, which is even cheaper. It still offers a better feature set than the Samsung DU8000, but we won't get into it here. Instead, you can check out our video review linked in the description below. Well, that's all we have to say about the Samsung DU8000. If you want a more detailed write-up on the TV, check out our written review. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. That means that when watching HDR content, the brightness of the shadows, midtones, and highlights are mostly just as the creator content.
You okay?
The creator content. I love when it's like a really good run and then it's just like creator content. Like, yes, yeah.